Welcome once again to Growth is Personal podcast. Today, we're going to be having a very, not just interesting conversation, but an important conversation on the podcast today. So if you're going to be watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and also leave a comment about the conversation today. If you're also listening on Spotify or Apple, be sure to rate the podcast, give us your feedback, drop a question, leave a review, whatever you want to express yourself based on this conversation, because I think it's going to be a very important one. Please do that, and we'll get back to you as well. So thank you for being a part of our podcast community today.
Hi, my name is Emeka Warrior, and welcome to Growth is Personal. Each week, I share insights and strategies that will equip you to accelerate your personal and professional growth and bring you conversations that will empower you to thrive in life, career, and business.
Today, I have a phenomenal guest. I usually get phenomenal guests on our show. And today, we have Dr. Yewande Fadojutimi. Dr. Yewande, we've gone way back I've been following her. I followed you for a while. I see what you do on Instagram. You go live. I think recently you transitioned to LinkedIn. That's my own area. So, and I've been following you and see the great work that you do. And I'm glad that you could join us on today's podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I know that this has been a long time coming.
Yes.
I'm very glad to be here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So before we go into our conversation, I just want to get a little bit of, who you are. Who is Dr. Yewande? What do we need to know to understand where you have been to where you are today, helping people with mental health, well-being and psychological well-being. So just give us a little bit of your story. I know you also migrated to Canada. So tell us a bit about that.
Sure. We might as well go all the way back.
Right.
So my family migrated to Canada in 2000. So it'll be 25 years coming up October of this year. And at the time, I was a teenager, just coming to the end of high school. And did I really know what I wanted to be when I grew up? To be honest, I wanted to be a teacher, interestingly enough. But by the time I finished high school, I got into university. I wanted a challenge, not to say that teaching is not challenging. Of course it is. But I thought about medicine. I said, you know what? Let me try for medicine. So I wrote the exams, got into medical school, and spent 4 years. So that would be 2006 to 2010. So 2010 is when I became a medical doctor. And I loved my work. I went into residency, did emergency medicine. I loved emergency medicine. I remember growing up, one of my favorite things to do was pretend to be a detective, right? Solving mystery shows. Whenever we would watch movies, I would try to guess, okay, who did it? Who's the bad guy? And so the emergency medicine, the emergency department is a little bit like that, where you have no idea what is going to come through your doors on any given shift, right? And so is it going to be a heart attack? Is it going to be a stroke? Is it going to be severe sepsis? And then people come in with symptoms and you're trying to figure out, okay, what's going on with this person? It's like solving a puzzle. It's like doing detective work. And I really enjoyed it. But there came a time when I started to notice changes, which I know we're going to go into. And there'll be days when I would leave work feeling low, days when I would end my shift, sometimes a 12-hour shift, sometimes a 24-hour shift. And I would just sit in my car. And next thing you know, I'm crying and I'm not really sure what's going on. There'll be times when I would leave feeling, okay, I don't know that I really connected with this family, that their loved one is going through a very, very serious health issue. And it just felt like, I was just going from one issue, one patient to the next, It always boggles my mind when I look back on my 10-year time frame. And I can't remember the name of one person that I took care of in the emergency department. And I don't know what that means. I know, of course, we're very busy. We see lots and lots of people. But to sit down and say, oh, I saw Mr. Smith or Miss Jane, and they came in with this, and I helped them with that one name. It's whenever I think about that fact, it really boggles my mind. And so all that to say, it came to a point where I had to do a lot of reflection. It wasn't something I intentionally decided to do. It's just circumstance. I went on maternity leave, and that was just a good time for me to do some reflection. And in that reflection, I decided, you know what, with everything that I've observed, it may be time to do a bit of a career transition. And so that's just part of the story, part of my background, my education, and a little bit of how I got to where I am today.
Wow. We'll talk about the transition because I'm really interested in that. But I want to talk about to the young person who is listening or watching. You know, you said you came to Canada, and I'm looking at your profile here, your qualifications, and I'm like, ooh, you know, and what I've seen, you know, the few years I've spent here is the drive for young people to want to grow, the drive for young people to believe that they can become more, like they can do all of these things, you know, even going to doctor of medicine. Some kids are very afraid. Like I've talked to some teenagers, and it's not even their scope. Like, no, I'm not going to go there. But so what was the driving force, or what was the foundation for you that gave you the belief that you could do this and you could pursue it?
Oh, yeah, I love this question so much because it gives me the opportunity to talk about my mother. Okay. So my mother is a medical doctor. She trained in Nigeria. She went to University of Ibadan, and she was an ophthalmologist in Nigeria. She had her eye clinic, you know, performed eye surgery, all of that. So when we moved to Canada, of course, she was the adult. She's a parent, right? I was a teenager then. And what that meant was she had to put her career on hold. And the plan was, you know, she would settle us and maybe go back to Nigeria. You know, it wasn't really certain what she would do. And she tells a story of when one day we were at a family friend's birthday party, and she was surrounded by many doctors, and everybody was having a good time. They were laughing, they were dancing. And she was just looking at them, and she said, you know, it's possible for me too. It's possible for me too. And she had conversations with some of the other doctors there. And the next day, she said that one of the doctors that was there came to the house, living in Markham at the time, Markham, Ontario, still living in the same house, actually 25 years later. She's still there. But he came to the house on his lunch break with a book. At the time, Toronto Notes, that's what doctors used to study to qualify. So he took his lunch break, came to the house and said to her, you know what, just read this book cover to cover, take the exams, and you can do it. You can do it. So she did it. She did it. She took the exam. She qualified as a medical doctor here and still practices as a medical doctor here in Canada. So when you ask me, you know, what gave me the vision, what gave me the confidence that I could do it, it was passed on to me, of course, watching my mom, and as a woman in her 40s at the time, pushing 50 with 4 kids, right? Watching her do that gave me the confidence to do so. So first of all, having examples of what's possible, right? Having examples of what's possible, so important. I also want to talk about my dad, right? My dad would always tell me, Yewande, the worst they can say is no. So go for it. The worst they can say is no, just have your plan A, your plan B, your plan C, but go for that plan A, because the worst they can say is no, and no is not going to kill you. So those are the 2 things that really gave me that confidence. And this is why I'm big on mentoring, because when you are able to show someone that, oh, someone that looks like me, that talks like me, that has come from similar background as me can do this, it suddenly opens up a world of possibilities that, okay, I can do it too. So it happened for my mom. And then she was the example that I was now able to follow as well too.
Wow, this is a this is a lesson on parenting, because now I can see how children model. I do coaching, and oftentimes, and I do a lot with immigrants, and one of the things I tell them is that the life that you're trying to create here, the career you're pursuing here, remember that you're not doing it just for yourself, that your kids are going to take on from you. They're watching. So the way you push yourself and drive yourself to do more, to become more, is what they're going to pick. No matter what you say, if they don't see it, they're not going to do it. So I'm glad that you're sharing this now, because this is a wake-up call to new immigrants, because we have a lot of. I came in here 2015, and there's a certain group of new immigrant coming in 2020, 2021, and sometimes I see some things that the decisions they make, and I'm like, do you really think about the implications of what you're doing? I know, yes, we're driven by money. We want to just pay the bills, but are you thinking about the next generation? In fact, I was talking to someone on Sunday. I said, there's a crisis going on now with the second generation immigrant, because the first generation, they're here, some of them are thriving, but they're not preparing the pathway for the second generation.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad that you're sharing this. And I just wanted to just dwell on this, because I know a lot of immigrants watch this podcast and listen to this podcast. So if you can do it, right, pursue medicine and pursue to the highest level, and then transition, then it's possible for someone else to do something that they really want to do. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure. And to just further buttress that point, Emeka, community is critically important. There's a quote that says you are the sum of the 6 people you surround yourself with. I don't know if that's the exact quote, but there's something about being surrounded by people whose heads are screwed on their shoulders properly, who their decisions, the advice that they give, the decisions that they make, that will rub off on you.
That's right.
So that's, for every immigrant coming in, just be aware of where you settle, who you call your friends, who you surround yourself with, who your kids surround themselves with, because that ripple effect.
That one is important as well. Who your kids surround themselves with. Because I think we don't really pay attention to that. We leave them to themselves. We say, oh, they're good, but we're not intentionally curating. And I know people say, oh, let them be themselves, let them be kids. But the truth is a scripture that says that train up a child. Like that training, we don't really understand the context and the depth of that training in the way that they should go, right? So training also, if you look at boot camp, oftentimes they tell you, they have to put you in an environment to condition you for what you're trying to achieve, right?
Yes.
Same thing with parenting. We have to place our children. Okay, I'm going into parenting. I don't know why.
You're speaking my language. Yeah.
Because it's so important, because it's more important, and people focus a lot on money and all of that, but I believe so much in the legacy that we're trying to build here, because we're not here just for ourselves. The baton we're going to pass on, if we are not building resilient kids, if we're not building kids that understand who they are and the vision that they have for their life, it's almost like we never came here. Like we're just, you know what I mean? So
totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Totally. People say that they come to Canada if you ask the average immigrant, why did you immigrate to Canada? They will say because of their kids, right? But then for some reason, when the move happened, we lose sight of that. So what you're saying is critically important.
Yes, we lose sight of that. Okay, let's talk about. So I really want to talk about mental health and not just for immigrants, for everyone in general. But I will touch on the immigrants, because I can see a lot. If you go on social media today, you see a lot of people who are burnt out. Some of them can't hold it again, and they come on social media to cry and all of that. And we can see it happening. So let's talk about a hustle culture, right? How do we balance ambition and career growth without falling into the trap of overworking ourselves? Because why I said that is I've seen people who work 3 jobs, and you ask them, what's the end goal? I know, there's a lot of things going on. You have to pay bills, but at what point do we draw the line that, okay, how do I balance my career growth, the needs to make it financially, and also my health?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The good thing about social media is it's bringing a lot of awareness to some of these things. In the past, people would just suffer in silence, but at least now the word is getting out there that, okay, there's such a thing as depression, such a thing as anxiety, there's such a thing as burnout. Now, one thing that I like to ask, like if I have a client sitting in front of me and we're talking about burnout, we're talking about, ambition and balancing that with mental health, many times we're having to go inward and really ask, okay, so what is your motivation for this drive that you have? Where is this drive coming from in the first place? So I'll have people say things like, well, I want that promotion so I can have this nice LinkedIn announcement saying I'm happy to announce that, like they're really striving for that director role because they really want to prove something to people. Or it's something that has been ingrained in them that you work hard. And that's the only way that your happiness is going to come is from hard work. And so many of them are hardwired to push and to push and to push and to push. And interestingly, even when they get that director role, even when they get that promotion, they don't even enjoy it because it's like, okay, what's next? They're looking for the next thing all of a sudden. So we're having to question, okay, what exactly is your motive? So that's one thing when it comes to career ambition. What is your motive? Are you trying to prove something to other people? Are you deriving your sense of importance, your sense of self-worth from this beautiful title? Is that what makes you feel good about yourself? Then you mentioned bills, which is another big part of it too, where people are working multiple jobs, as you said, just to make ends meet. Just to make ends meet. Then we start talking about, okay, the financial issue here. Are you living beyond your means at this point? Have you bought this house? When the housing market was going crazy a couple of years ago, I was just so worried about so many people because I could almost see the implication. I could fast forward a few years and I could see exactly what's happening now. That people are not able to, people are having to sell their houses at a loss and all of that. So many people are emotional about their financial decisions. They buy the houses, they buy the cars, they're sending their kids to expensive schools, which, to be honest, there's nothing wrong. I love to live in a beautiful house. I want to give my kids the best education. But when we start to think about the cost benefit, the opportunity cost, because if you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else.
That's right.
If you're buying the big house and it's causing you to work 3 jobs that you hardly see your kids, your health is suffering. The number of 30-something and 40-something-year-olds I'm seeing now with high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, stress, some even having heart attacks at a young age. Yes, it's nice to have these things and to want to live well, but we also need to look at the cost as well. So to answer your question, it's twofold. Number one, what is that internal motivation? Are you doing it because you're trying to impress somebody? For some, it's our fathers or our mothers that every time we grew up with, like, okay, you came home with 98%. Oh yeah, where's the other 2%? The person that came first, do they have 2 heads? And it's now ingrained in you to keep pushing and striving and becoming more and more ambitious. So that's that internal rewiring that has to happen. Then on the financial point of view, have you bitten off more than you can chew? Do you have to sit down and have some tough conversations and make some tough decisions because the way that you're going, the hustling is not sustainable? So those are the 2 aspects that I see quite often.
Yeah, and very good points there. One thing I want to add as well is the idea, and you talked about, I wrote it down here, people pleasing. I've seen a lot of people who will say things like, oh, I want to make, because of what people will say back home. I've literally seen people say that somebody asked them a question that, oh, you've been in Canada, for example, for 5 years, 7 years. What do you have to show for it?
Yeah.
So for them to be able to have to brag when they go home, they want to say that they have this, they have that, or take pictures and stuff like that. I mean, you need to realize that you can't keep living for people. You can't keep living to make people happy or make people to in the eyes of people to look like you've made it. Like, you know what they call it, it's fake it to look. People are trying to look rich and they're not actually rich. So I think there has to be a balance to say, you know what, I'm going to live my life based on what my own what I'm trying to achieve, what lifestyle I want to live, and I'm not going to lose that to please people. So great point there you shared. I want to go straight into this. How do people, what are the early signs people can see to know that they are going towards burnout? Like, because what I've seen is and I've seen this a lot of, doctors now who come on social media and say things like the people who are working and don't even know that they're carrying these, health conditions as a result of stress. So what are the early signs that people should look out for when it comes to their mental health declining?
Okay. So first of all, what I will say is that many times the people around you, especially if they care about you, will often be the first to say, hey, you need to slow down. That I'm seeing the signs of stress on you, that you need to slow down. But unfortunately, most people don't listen. So that's the first thing. If you've noticed that friends, loved ones are saying, hey, I can see that this whole thing is wearing on you, you need to slow down, that's one sign. Then, of course, coming into physical symptoms, there are other signs too. Everybody is different. Headaches are a common sign that a lot of people will experience. So having headaches, specifically what we call tension headaches, so that might feel like a tight band around the person's head, like something just squeezing around your head. If a person is prone to migraine headaches, they might start to experience more of their migraine headaches. And so migraine headaches are usually one side, throbbing headaches. It may come with nausea, it may come with visual disturbances, right? Neck pain, back pain, joint pain, all of those things. Whenever your body is exhibiting symptoms that are unusual, it's like a car engine sign coming on. Most of us ignore the sign and we just say, oh, maybe it's malfunctioning, or maybe we ignore the sign. We don't take it to the mechanic right away. But whenever our bodies are showing signs of headaches, sometimes it's upset stomach. You go to the office and your stomach is just upset all the time. You cannot even eat. Nausea. You can't even stomach anything because your nervous system is so activated. That's another sign. And of course, sleep disturbances. Whereas before, maybe you used to sleep well and now you wake up at 3 a.m. and you can't get back to sleep. That's another sign. So everybody is different. What I will say is just take stock, pay attention to your body, and be honest with yourselves. For most people, unfortunately, especially driven, ambitious, high achievers, we just push through the symptoms. The headache is there, but you're just pushing through the symptoms. And what I've seen too often is that eventually the body is going to be like, I've warned you, you haven't been paying attention, and it just knocks out. Similar to a car, the longer you ignore that engine light, in the middle of the highway one day, you notice that the car just isn't working anymore. And once we get to that point of complete burnout, the cost is even higher. It takes much longer to recover than if you had paid attention to the sign to begin with and dealt with the issue right away.
Right away. Yeah. Can we talk about the sleep one? Because I've seen a lot, people say that, I notice that I don't fall asleep, easily. It takes me time to fall asleep, or I sleep and the little noise wakes me up. I can't get back to sleep again. Now, I know this is probably not, you're a doctor, so I would say that I don't want to go to the extra because it's not a health podcast. So, but I want to be I want to be able to give some value to people who will listen. So, someone who might be going through that, beyond maybe other health conditions that might be going on, what are the things they can begin to do or advise they can take to help themselves get a good sleep?
Yeah, so that's great. I'm talking about sleep constantly. I'm always talking about sleep in my practice, especially. So, the clue that you said just now, when I sleep, even a light noise wakes me up. That, people will say, well, I'm a light sleeper. Many times it's because your mind has not fully shut down in order to get a good rest. And there are many reasons why. I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible. But one of the things that I often will talk to my clients about is the fact that your nervous system, your mind is designed to keep you alive. It's designed for survival, right? So if your mind doesn't feel safe, and we're talking about psychological safety here, if your mind doesn't feel like it's safe to shut down, it's going to stay at a level of arousal such that any small thing is going to wake you up, because it's like there's so much activation going on. I can't afford to really enter into that deep rest, because what if I get an email? What if somebody needs me? What if? And so it stays at that level of arousal such that something slight will wake it up, right? So that's one thing that I'm often exploring with my clients, especially if they say, oh, I don't feel like I really enter into sleep. It's like, okay, why? What is keeping you awake? Why isn't your mind settled enough to go into a deep sleep? Then, of course, we're talking about other physiological things like your caffeine intake, phone. That is a big one. People say, oh, I need my phone to fall asleep. I need my TV to fall asleep, which has now become an association. It's become a habit, right? But it's very important for us to break that association between phone and sleep. Why? Because even though it feels like you're passively taking in information, you're giving your mind more work to do.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? You're feeding it with data. You're putting in input such that it's like, okay, well, this lady has gone to sleep now, but we have all this data that we need to
Think about.
that we need to think about. Do we archive this? Do we process this? Do we, so your body has gone to sleep, but your mind is still working because of all the data that it has received at the last minute as you're trying to go to bed. There's also something about the light that we receive from our screens that alters our ability to go into a restorative sleep, right? So those are some of the things that become habits that we don't know are now costing us the rest that we need for good mental health and all of that. So, I mean, sleep hygiene is a whole topic on its own. Yeah, but as it comes to stress, as it pertains to coping mechanisms, when it comes to coping with our stress, those are the things that I will just highlight. Okay, what is keeping you up? One of the things that many of my clients have found helpful is doing what's called a brain dump or a thought dump before they go to bed. And this was actually helpful for me in a time when I was having a hard time sleeping. So, and many times it's because these are busy people and they have so much on their minds that their minds, again, are still working as they're trying to go to sleep. So what they would do, or what I would recommend, is just having a piece of paper or a notebook by your bedside. And as you're trying to go to sleep, all the different thoughts, oh, I forgot to do this, or I need to do that, or writing everything down as it comes to mind, because what that is doing is it's taking it out of your mind, and your mind is almost delegating it to a piece of paper. So it's like, okay, I'm shutting down now. I'm going to get bed for the night, but hey, piece of paper, hold on to this information for me so that tomorrow when I wake up, I can revisit it. I like to give the analogy of, it's almost like having all these tabs open on your laptop, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but you try to shut your laptop down and it's like, oh, I can't shut down. This program is still running, or that program is still running. Doing a thought dump or brain dump is almost like shutting down all of those tabs, closing those tabs one by one. So your brain is finally like, oh, okay, I've delegated it to someone. Tomorrow I'll come back and take over. So that's one thing that's been helpful, a thought dump or a brain dump, just as you've been going to bed. Now, in the middle of the night, there would be times when I would wake up and something would come to mind. I wouldn't bother putting on the lights. Please don't use your phone, because your phone, again, can lead to distractions. It has to be a piece of paper. So I would wake up in the middle of the night, the thoughts would come up. I would just scribble it down on the piece of paper, and at least it's on the paper. I can revisit it tomorrow. You don't have to put on the lights. You don't have to grab your phone, but it's a way of, again, just delegating that thought to a piece of paper so that your mind can finally say, okay, we've shut down for the night. We'll revisit in the morning.
That's a good one. That's a good one. That's a good one, because I think that will really be helpful. I want to ask you mentioned between mind and brain. What is the difference?
Yeah.
Like which of the parts of the mind or the brain works for this for sleep? Because I want to know. I just want to be. I don't want to be confused. Like, is it the
Oh,
brain
yeah.
or is it the mind?
Okay. Oh, yeah. I love that question so much. And it's both. So just to simplify, the brain is the physical organ, right? The brain is the part that you can touch. It's a part with the sulci, the gyri. It's a part with the cerebellum, the medulla. It's all of that. The physical part that you can see and touch. So that's the brain. It's the organ. The mind is the intangible parts. The mind is the part that is our emotions, the part that's our thoughts, the part that's our habits, the part that is our personality, the intangible. Some people call it the soul. I would also sometimes call it the soul, the essence of who you are. And they are connected because we've actually done studies where, for example, if somebody is a smoker and they have that smoking habit, when we do functional brain studies where we're looking at the physical structure of the brain, we can actually see parts of their brain that lights up whenever they have a craving or wherever they're thinking about smoking. And then when they come off the habit, those parts of the brain, those networks actually get weaker. Right? So the habit is the smoking, the cravings, those are all the intangible parts that are the mind, part of the mind, but the brain is the part that we can see, the part that we can touch. So when it comes to sleep, it's both. It's both your mind, your thoughts, and then we know that there are parts of the brain that, if damaged, can actually affect your sleep. They can they can make you more sleepy, right? They can make you more sleepy, or they can cause you to be more awake. So it's both.
It's both.
But
Okay.
the brain is the structure, the physical
Right.
anatomy part, and the mind is the intangible part.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to just clear that and to get an understanding. Now let's talk about. I still want to do a little bit about sleep. So people say 8 hours. We've had gurus, experts, social media influencers or people who are online say, hey, get 8 hours of sleep. That's where you're more productive. Or some people say, well, if you're sleeping 8 hours, you are lazy. You don't have a life. So tell us, when it comes to your mental health, what is the recommendation? 8 hours, 4 hours, what works?
Okay, first of all, that word lazy always comes up. And as someone who is a champion for sleep, I remember I was speaking to a lady and she said that she doesn't understand how people can sleep in the middle of the day, that's so lazy, that's so unproductive, it's irresponsible. And I had to tell her, you need to have seen me yesterday. Because I'm the kind of person, if the sleep comes, I have to sleep. And I will say this because I learned this in my university days when I was taking very heavy courses. And so one of the habits that I formed was caffeine never worked for me. It just made me more sick, and I would still sleep anyways. I wouldn't sleep well, but I would still sleep. So caffeine never worked for me. So I would pull all-nighters. I would stay up. I would force myself to stay up all night so that I could get through the material and do the exam the next day. I remember one specific exam. It was an immunology course. And I didn't do well on the exam, but I was like, I knew the material well. I had studied hard, only for me to look at my test and I was just making silly mistakes. Silly mistakes, things that I knew the answer to. I was circling the wrong thing. I obviously wasn't processing the information properly. And I said, you know what, enough of these all-nighters. I need my brain rested in order to be productive. I need it rested in order to process information well, in order to make high-level decisions. There's a reason why, I think it was Jeff Bezos who was sharing his sleep. And he said that, no, he sleeps a full 8 hours so that he can make good decisions, so that he can make high quality decisions. Right. I can't remember the number of drinks that is equated to sleep deprivation. I think it's like 3 or 4 alcoholic beverages, if I'm not mistaken. When you look at the decisions that people make when they are sleep deprived, they might as well be intoxicated. Right? And they've actually done studies on this. Right. So when it comes to hustle culture and sleep deprivation, or I'll sleep when I'm dead, I used to hear that a lot growing up from friends who were hard workers. it's counterproductive, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be as efficient. You're not going to be as sharp. You're going to make silly mistakes if your brain is not well rested, if your mind is not well rested. Now, with regards to the number of hours for sleep that you have had asked, it varies. So one of the questions that I like to ask is, when you slept for those 8 hours, did you wake up feeling rested? And, it's just a clue for me to decide, okay, are you oversleeping? Are you undersleeping? For some people, it's 8 hours. For some people, it's 7. For some people, it's 6 hours. Everybody is different. But once you start getting into the 4-5 hour window, it gets to a point where, yes, you might be surviving, but it's not optimal. It's not optimal.
Can you batch your sleep?
Pardon me?
Can you batch your sleep? So you say, okay, I will sleep in the afternoon and then sleep the remaining 4 hours at night.
Yeah, so some people talk about a sleep bank or sleep debts, where you can sleep for maybe 4 hours and then pay the remaining 4 hours during the day. It's not really ideal. Of course, we know that there are people who work shifts, for example, and they have to batch their sleep that way. It's not ideal. Ideally, you want the full cycle, because our sleep goes in 90-minute cycles, right? Our sleep goes in 90-minute cycles, and you really want a full set of those cycles to really have that restorative sleep. Not every part of our sleep cycle is in that restorative sleep state, right? So if you only have 2 of those restorative sleep states, it's not ideal. It's not ideal. I know that people do it because of the condition and the type of work that they're in. Some people will wait till the weekend. They will deprive themselves of sleep and say, oh, I'll catch up on the weekend. Again, not ideal, because it's almost like forcing your car to go full speed ahead and say, oh, I'm just going to service it twice a year, right? Ideally, you want to have the maintenance as often as possible. Yeah.
Is age also play a role in the amount of sleep you get? One question. And also, what is the recommendation? Because it appears to me that as the older you get, the more you should be sleeping, right? Or am I wrong?
So the older you get, the less sleep is required. And when I say older, so if I'm looking at a newborn, an infant, school-aged kids, for example, generally 11 to 12 hours sleep is ideal for especially elementary school aged kids, younger elementary. There have been a lot of talk lately about teenagers, right? And the way that the school system is set up, they actually don't get enough sleep. They should still be getting about 10 hours of sleep per night, 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night, but most of them are maybe getting 6 hours of sleep, because they sleep late, wake up early, they're up late doing homework. I remember when I was in high school, I would be up till like 3 a.m., falling asleep on my computer and waking up 3 hours later to get to school. So there's been a lot of talk about when should school start, when should school end. But to answer your question, yes, age is a determining factor, and it goes longer when you're younger. When you get to adulthood, it's a little bit shorter. And as we get into elderly states, into our 70s, then you notice that more sleep might be required at that point in time. But generally, as the brain is still developing, adolescence, childhood, more sleep is ideal.
Ideal. Okay, let's move away from sleep to talk about, many professionals find it difficult to set boundaries. I think one of the main concerns about mental health is that oftentimes things that affect your mental health are outside of your control. External factors. So people have a hard time setting boundaries. How can people confidently communicate their boundaries without sounding like they're trying to isolate themselves, kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. So one thing that's interesting is we talk about boundaries, but some people don't even know what their own boundaries are. So that's the first step. What are your boundaries? Because sometimes I will have conversations with people and they say, oh, this person crossed my boundaries, or this person did this person. I was like, well, was there an expectation that was set to begin with? Like, what was the expectation? What are the boundaries? What are you going to say yes to? What are you going to say no to? Because having an idea ahead of time, and of course, you don't really know 100%, but even knowing what those boundaries are ahead of time. So, for example, I won't take a project on if the deadline is 1 week out, just as an example. Because sometimes people will come and say, oh, I have a project for you and it's urgent and it's due. One of my clients yesterday was telling me that he got an order and it was due the same day. And he quickly responded and said, unfortunately, it's not going to be done today. This is the deadline that you can expect it to have it by, and he set his own date, right? Some people might just take that and just take it and say, okay, well, and then they're up all night trying to do the project and it affects their performance and all of that. So knowing ahead of time, what will you say yes to? What will you say no to? Now, people are afraid of saying no because, again, you don't want to sound like you're not a team player. You don't want to come across as lazy and all of that, which I understand, which is fine, especially early on in your career. I think as you grow in your career, it becomes so much easier. And especially when people know your track record, when people know that you are a performer, it becomes a lot easier to say no because you're not as worried about their impression of you. But when you're younger, when you're earlier on in your career, there are ways that you can say no without it just being an outright no. So for example, you have 3 projects going on and you feel like you've hit your capacity or you're approaching your capacity, and another project is now brought to your table. It's as simple as saying, okay, thank you for the opportunity. However, I have these other 3 projects ongoing. Which of these 3 projects would you like me to put on the back burner so that I can bring on this one? So you're not really saying no, but you set that boundary for yourself saying, I'm only going to work on 3 projects at once. Now I have this 4th one, having that conversation and saying, okay, which one can I delegate to somebody else, right? I had a client who her boss had come and offered her, I can't remember what the office was doing, but they had to get something done. And the boss had said, well, would you like to do this? Would you like to take this on? And she was at capacity. And she simply said, you know what, I'm going to leave that decision to you. Why don't you look at everybody on the team's workload and make the decision accordingly? And so the boss said, okay, no problem, I'll do that. I never came back to her. So obviously the boss had gone and reviewed everybody's workload and decided to give it to somebody else, right? So there are creative ways of saying no without outrightly saying, no, I'm not doing this. I'm too tired. I'm overwhelmed. Many of us don't want to get to that point, but there are other ways of saying no without actually saying no. And of course, as you advance in your career, sometimes it's like, no, I'm not doing that. and you have the confidence when there are levels. Yeah, when there are levels. Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's talk about work-life balance. And people have said that there's nothing like work-life balance. You just have to, if you're trying to balance things, it can be 50-50. Something will have to give up for something else, right? But I believe that there has to be a balance, right? If you don't create that balance, you're going to be off balance, and off balance means that something will be given in for something. So how do we create some sort of balance in our lives with our career such that we don't feel like we are missing out on we're not missing out on life and also building a great career? Because I see people do, they're having great time, they're also building a career. What are they doing differently, and what can we learn from them? So can you share something on that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, over the years, you would have heard people say, oh, there's no such thing as balance. It's more work-life harmony, work-life satisfaction, which is something I used to say a lot as well too. Work-life integration. It's at the end of the day, I believe it's all semantics. We're all looking for the same thing, which is how can I do all these things and not feel like I'm dropping the ball or not feel like I'm going crazy, right? The terminology might help people because for some, I know some people that are very strict in their definitions of things. And so if you say balance, to them, it's like, well, that means 50-50, right? But we know that 50-50 is really not possible.
Also, yeah.
So there are a few analogies that I like to use to describe to any of my clients if they are struggling with, feeling like they're dropping the ball here, feeling like they're doing all these things, but they're not doing anything well. I like to think about, I don't know if you've ever seen, whether on TV or a circus act of a performer that's usually, I think America's Got Talent, sometimes they'll have a performer that has balanced some plates on a stick and is trying to spin all the plates. Right. So that's the analogy that I like to keep in mind, that at any given time, we all have spinning plates, whether it's a project that we're working on, whether it's our physical health, our mental health, whether it's aging parents, children, finances. So imagine you have all these spinning plates. There are some plates that you can just count on the momentum that you've given it, and they're spinning and they're going, they're fine, and you can kind of forget about them a little bit. They have this is what having systems in place looks like. You have a system, you have structure, you have a flow, so they don't really need your attention in that given moment. So those plates are spinning, they're going on their own momentum. But there may be 2 or 3 plates that need your attention, that need you to actively be looking at them, be balancing them, putting in time, putting in effort. And those are the plates that need that attention at that given time. Everything else has its own momentum going. And this is why I see a lot of moms, a lot of women, I always tell them, get your systems and structures at home in place first. Because when there is a flow to everybody at home knows what they're eating, they know where things are in the house, they know when cleaning is happening. If there's that flow, at least that can take care of itself. You don't have to be putting out fires constantly at home. And so when that's in place, then we can focus on, okay, what are the projects that need my attention right now? Do I need to be traveling more often in this season? What about mom? What about dad? Do I need to visit them more often? Right? But when things are in balance, so to speak, in other areas of your life, it provides this capacity, this breathing room to then focus on other things that may need your attention at any given point in time. And then if for some reason you notice, oh my goodness, that plate at home is losing its momentum, then we can focus on it, give it some more speed, so to speak, some more balance, and then go back to the things that need our attention. So that momentum is having systems in place, having support, structures, I like to call them rhythms of grace, which comes from a scripture in the Bible, where these unforced rhythms of grace, where you know what time you wake up. The kids know what to do when they wake up. The kids know where to find their snacks. You have a timetable for food. So it's not like, mommy, what's for dinner? Mommy, what's for lunch? You know when you're doing your groceries. When you have those unforced rhythms of grace, it gives more breathing room to then focus and balance everything else that's going on. So that's how I conceptualize work-life balance.
Wow, that's a good one. That felt very whole. And to add to highlight the point you mentioned there, to be able to create that balance, integration, whatever the like to call it, is by having system in place, having a structure, having some support, to ensure that everyone around you understand what they need to do, so that, because I think what happens in family is where there's no system, that's where people begin to feel stressed. The kids are calling you here, they don't know what to do. So I think early on, creating that system, even as a family unit, to know that, okay, this is what I would do, this is what the kids are going to be doing, helps you to have time to, because some people actually, okay, how do you have time to do a podcast? How do you have time to do your work, you write your writing? Is because there's a system, and system doesn't have to, when people hear something like, okay, what's the system? It's just simple steps or simple habits that you have created that enables things to run. just like
Yeah.
run on default.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for
Absolutely.
sharing that. Let's talk about toxic workplaces. People, currently there are a lot of people who are probably going through toxic workplace, and they're finding it difficult to be able to, make a move because, they have to keep this job so that they can pay the bills. How can they, manage, or, is it do they have to leave the toxic workplace, or how can they manage that environment such that it doesn't affect their mental health?
Yeah, this is a huge challenge because I like to say that bad bosses are a public health issue. Why? Because the number of clients that are in my office because of bad bosses, it's a problem. It's a problem. So, with regards to how to manage a toxic workplace, one thing I always ask my clients, because many times the women I see are they take a lot, meaning that they are known to be strong women and they come from a background, whether it's Nigerian, whether it's Hispanic, where they have been trained to just chest it, to take it, as we say. Right. And so the first question I ask is, have you talked to anyone about this? Have you brought this up with HR, for example? For some of them, they're afraid to speak to HR because they never know, is HR really for me? Is HR really against me? But one thing I say is just at least bring it to their attention, because we never know whether this particular boss, if we're using a boss, for example, has received multiple complaints from other people, and your complaint is now the one that's going to then trigger an investigation or something like that. So have you spoken to HR? Many of them will say, okay, you know what, I never really knew how to navigate that. And we talk through how to navigate that. Now, if HR doesn't seem to be a safe space, because let's be honest, it may not be a safe space for many people.
Yes.
This is what I'm saying. Okay, do we need to take some time off? Do we need to take 4 weeks off just to work on recovering from what has happened? Was it one particular situation? Is it something that, as a therapist or a coach or a mentor, that can walk you through how to regulate your nervous system, how to set better boundaries, how to cope with confidence building? Because sometimes being in a toxic workplace, it does crazy things to people and their confidence, right?
Yes.
So sometimes they're having to step away for some time to get the skills required to cope in that environment. Of course, the ideal situation would be to leave, but I know that that can get very complicated. For one reason, many people will like, well, if I leave, it means that they won. That's what I'll hear. Well, it means that this person won. And I say, okay, that's fair. But do you leave to fight another day? Right? Do you leave so that you can live to fight another day? Number one, because nobody really likes to feel like a bully has won. Right? But sometimes I have to say, well, okay, I get that, but can we consider your health, your kids, your family? This environment is costing too much. So the ideal situation would be either to find a different job, or within the same organization, is there a move to a different department that you can make? And so it's a tough one for sure. It's a tough one. So speaking to HR, if you can't speak to HR, talk to a professional who can help you manage the consequences of being in that environment. And finally, what's your exit strategy? What's your exit strategy? Yeah.
That's right. Because I know that you, I was going to talk about your career transition, but let me dwell a little bit about this, toxic workplace. Another thing I've seen is that, people don't really consider that when they're making decisions on where to move into. Because I tell people sometimes it's not just about the company you work at, it's the people you work at, it's the culture of that environment. So how are you ensuring that you're doing enough research? I know, yes, you can't get 100% to know that this place is a toxic workplace, but have you done enough research to know, have you checked on Glassdoor? Have you read a lot, about who this company is before you jump into? So I think that's another thing people need to do as well, to really take where they work as important as how much they're going to make in that job, so let's talk about practical strategies. What are the 3 tips you're going to share for managing stress in today's day and age and excelling in your career?
Yeah, this is again something I'm always talking about. So some of the main tips that come up, we already spoke about sleep, so I won't go into sleep. I'll give some other strategies. I talk about gratitude a lot. And sometimes it feels very soft, like, okay, gratitude, yeah, okay, I'm grateful, I'm a grateful person. But there's actually an art and science to gratitude. And the reason gratitude is so important is because by default, we have a tendency to remember the negative. It's just a survival thing. You remember the things that didn't go well so that you don't do it again. You remember the food that gave food poisoning so that you don't eat it again, right? Those negative experiences, they stand out in our minds. And if we have enough of those and they consume us, we're going to start to look at the world with a very negative point of view, and that can add to our stress. So what does gratitude do? Gratitude serves to offset the weight of all that negativity. So when you force your mind, and by the way, it doesn't come naturally to many of us. Reflecting and thinking about, okay, what went well today? What made me smile today? What made me happy today? It doesn't come naturally. We tend to remember the negative. So training your brain, your mind to say, okay, let me even think about what actually went well today. It helps to balance the impact of all the negativity that we are designed to remember. We tend to remember the negative. So if you practice gratitude, meaning writing down every day, the way I like to do it is, okay, look back at the past 24 hours. What are 3 things that happened between 8 a.m. today and 8 a.m. yesterday that made me happy? And it's always interesting how hard sometimes it is for me to remember even remarkable things that happened. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, how could I have easily so forgotten what happened just 24 hours ago? Is because we filter it out. But the thing that happened 1 week ago, many people are still holding on to. So gratitude is a way of offsetting the stress that comes from harboring, rehashing, reliving all the negativity, the things that haven't gone well. So that's one thing. And it's just as simple as writing 3 things down every morning, 3 things that happened between yesterday and today that I'm grateful for. Importantly, they have to be specific things, because some people will come and say, oh, Dr. Yewande, this gratitude thing is the same 3 things I'm writing every day. So that's my cue to say they're probably just writing, I'm grateful for my job, I'm grateful for my spouse, I'm grateful for my house. No, it has to be more specific. So instead of saying, I'm grateful for my kids, oh, I'm grateful for the card that my daughter made for me yesterday. It was so sweet and so thoughtful. Or I'm grateful for the way my son hugged my leg when I came to pick him up from daycare. You know, it has to be as specific as that, because what you're doing is you're recreating the memories, and it releases some of the feel-good hormones that you were experiencing as you got that hug or as you got that card. You actually start smiling as you are writing these things down, which tells us that, okay, the gratitude is actually working. So that's the first thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, because I think that is very important when it comes to, like you said, reliving those experiences and that feel good hormones. But also I've heard people say things like, when people talk about gratitude, oftentimes they think about gratitude even in a so to speak negative way, in a sense that they're thinking they're grateful for bad things not happening to them. And I'm like, okay, this is a different thing entirely. Why can't you just be grateful for what you've experienced and what you have, rather than gratitude that's something bad? You know what I mean? So what's your take on that perspective?
I mean, it's very philosophical, right? Because then it then becomes, okay, the things. So if they say, oh, I'm grateful I'm not in hospital, which I mean is fine, right? You know, what about the people that are in hospital? Is it because there's something wrong? Is it because they did something bad? You know, but I mean, to each their own, right? I mean, I would prefer that you focus on because I don't even think, does it really hit the same way if you say, oh, I'm grateful I'm not in hospital versus I'm grateful I was able to get out of bed this morning.
Right.
Why let's use more of positive language. And the brain actually identifies more with positive language, because even as I was saying, I'm grateful I'm not in hospital, I started to visualize myself in hospital,
Hospital.
interestingly,
Yes. Mm. Mm.
right? As I was saying that, even though I was saying I'm grateful I'm not in hospital, I started to instantly see hospitals and people in sick beds and all of that. Whereas when I said I'm grateful I was able to get out of bed in morning, I could see myself smiling, getting out of bed, just a quick imagery, right? So I would offer just focus on what's going well instead of, though, I'm grateful I'm not this, I'm grateful I'm not that.
There was a social media, trend of somebody, rebuking, people like, why would you be grateful that you're not a hospital? People that are in hospital, it became a debate. And I'm like, I haven't thought about it that way. That, I think it's almost like this part of the world, because of how we, the faith and belief and the, prayer kind of thing, we tend to use that connotation when we're expressing gratitude that they're grateful. And I was just laughing. I was like, okay.
Yeah. It's definitely cultural. And to speak to your point about gratitude, one of the things I like to talk about too is toxic positivity, where a lot of people are like, okay, how can you put toxic and positivity in the same sentence? And I see it quite often, especially in religious circles, where it's pretending that everything is fine when everything is not fine.
That's a big one.
It is a big one, and we won't go into too much detail, but it's okay to acknowledge I'm feeling frustrated with the situation. However, I'm thankful that I'm able to at least navigate it with, you can balance. It's all about balance.
Right.
Because on the one extreme is pretending that everything is fine when everything is not fine. On the other extreme is negative, negative, negative all the time. But we're seeking that middle ground, whereas we can acknowledge the frustration of the situation, but still look to what is going well instead of focusing on what isn't going well.
I think this is a feedback, or for someone who, especially in a relationship where one person is trying to express how they're feeling and the other person is saying that, oh, just be positive. And I know the way for that person to heal, to recover, to get better, oftentimes for them to express how they feel. It's not saying that they are thinking negatively. It's just expression, and not toxic positivity, like you said. That makes so much sense. Now let's talk about the last thing here. You're thriving in your career now. I can see that you run your consulting practice, counseling service practice, you have a podcast, you have a digital a platform. What would you say from your own experience has made you, or is making you thrive in your career, that you can share to someone who is probably still struggling right now?
Yeah, so when I went through my self-discovery, what I call it self-discovery, maternity leave 2019, I did an exercise which was very interesting. I sent an email and text message, and it's an exercise I highly recommend. I ask my clients to do it. I sent it to family members and friends, people who knew me well. And I asked them, okay, what am I good at? What are my strengths? What do you come to me for? And interestingly, there was one word that kept coming up over and over. Everybody said this word. And if they didn't say it, they said a phrase that meant that word. And that word was empathy. And for some reason, it really hit me, because it's definitely not a word I would have used to describe myself at all. Like I never just saw myself as an empathetic person. In fact, I sometimes feel like I'm a bit cold-hearted, which we will get to in a minute. But people kept saying empathy, empathy, empathy. And what that did for me is it caused me to reevaluate and assess, okay, this career that I'm in right now, is it really allowing me to express my empathy? So that was the first thing. And the next thing it did for me was it allowed me explore careers where the strength of empathy could actually be something that I I leaned into, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that was one of the first things that I did was, okay, leaning into my strengths instead of fighting against my strengths. So what I will say is, if you are a young person and you're looking to thrive in your career, do you know what your strengths are? And are you in an environment where your strengths are allowed to come through and flourish? One of this exercise I did with one of my clients, and one of her strengths was aesthetic beauty. She also had collaboration, she had autonomy on there, and her work environment was the complete opposite. No wonder she was burnt out and miserable all the time. So what are your strengths? Are you leaning into them? Are you in an environment where your strengths can thrive? Or have they been pushed into a corner and you're not even acknowledging them or using them at all? I'm not sure if that answered your question.
It does. Excuse me, it does, definitely. And I think to add to that is, if your environment, at least we have different strengths, even if it's one or two strengths that you can express within the workplace that you, or where you currently work in or so, that's good. But if your strength is not, fully expressed, or you can't express any of your strength within where you're working, is either number one, you move, or number two, you create something outside that can give you that expression, because we definitely have the soul, needs that expression. And oftentimes the soul dwells, thrives when you're expressing your strength, because it's almost like it's part of you that, that is calling forth. So what I mean is, one of the ways for you to be able to thrive and feel fulfilled is when you're expressing what is inside of you.
Yeah.
Right. And oftentimes why we feel that gap, or we feel that emptiness, is because we're not expressing what we have inside of us that has been placed for us to express into the world. So if you're doing something that you're not that's not within your strength, either you move or you find something else that you can do on the side that helps you express your strength there. Thank you so much, Dr. Yewande. Final 3 questions. You have to answer these questions in one word. The first question is, and this is what we ask, I asked my guest, if there was one book that has made a huge impact in your life, what would it be?
I would say Atomic Habits. I was trying to pick between Atomic Habits and Millionaire Next Door. I know I'm cheating.
And they're 2 different books. I would have really loved to talk about that Millionaire Next Door, because I know that aspect of you. We still have to come to that maybe in the next conversation. But Atomic Habit is, I'm not surprised.
James Clear, Atomic Habits. I read it in 2019 and it shifted a lot for me. Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, if you were to write a book about your life, what would the title be?
Nice one. I would say, so this, I've actually thought about this. I've thought about this. So the question was, okay, the name of the book. Yes.
Yes. What would the title be?
So I've actually thought about this. So it's not a hard question.
Okay.
An Immigrant Girl's Guide to Success and Happiness. So that is what it would be called. An Immigrant Girl's Guide to Success and Happiness. And so what I would talk about is basically the things that I share, how to go, how to be confident, how to choose a career path, then how to raise the next generation of immigrants, identity. You should write the book. You should write the book. And this is going to be the first time you're sharing this, right? Mm-hmm. So you first heard it here on Grow This Personal Podcast. I'm looking forward to that book because I think it's going to help. It's going to help a lot of young people. Please write that book. I will follow up. I'm like, oh my gosh, now I have someone to be accountable to. I'm going to follow up on that book because I think every young girl, especially second generation, third generation, need to read that book because your life is. I mean, when I looked at your profile and see what you're doing, I'm like, this is the example we want to see. This is the example that we want to see in society today. Because what we see, I mean, I was watching a video some time ago, I think last year or so, of kids, even from the Black community that were fighting in the bus.
And they had to now put, police and stuff in the bus because these kids were just, fighting like, what are we doing? What are we doing? We're bringing our kids here and we're letting them just, go haywire. So the idea that, people, kids, young second generation immigrants can see others who have gone ahead and see that these are people who came here, who are doing well, who are thriving, who are living legacy, and it's possible for them as well. So please, I'm going to be on your case on that book.
Okay, now I'm doing work.
All right. Okay, the last question here is, what's the most unconventional piece of advice that you've received that turned out to be incredibly valuable?
And it has to be unconventional.
Yes.
I think that a lot of the advice that's been valuable for me has now become mainstream. So things like it's okay to say no. It's okay to, you don't have to do. So let me just summarize it this way. A big reason I am the way that I am is because of my parents. My parents would look at me and they would actually tell me, you need to calm, you need to relax so that you don't hurt yourself. Meaning you need to, and they would say it in Yoruba, which is where I'm from. They would say, you need to relax so that you don't burn out, so you don't break down. That was a word my dad would use often. Slow down so you don't break down, right? And I look at it now, and that was such a gift, because when I look at my peers, the women in my practice who also grew up in Nigerian households, they got the opposite advice, which is keep going, don't be lazy, keep going. And I look at it and I say, I'm very thankful, because I was still able to accomplish my goals, but in a way that I'm relaxed, I'm happy. Yes, I work hard. Yes, I'm ambitious, but my inner coach is not good enough. It's not good enough. It's more like, let's do what we can, do your best and leave the rest kind of attitude. So
that's so powerful. I like that. This is the way we're going to end this podcast, slow and fast. I think there was a book on that. I've not read it, but I've seen that title before, Slow and Fast. And oftentimes, because of how, the world is designed to be speed, microwave, boom, 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 a lot of people are burnt out today. But when we take it slow, we have to realize that slow is the new fast. Oh God.
So good.
Slow is the new fast, because there's a new, video that's been going on TikTok or Instagram, where they will drop a couple of cops, and the ones that try to go fast by bringing the one in the front, first, because they're trying to go fast, and the person who's slow, seems to be slow, but is going from the back, ends up winning. So I'm like, that's a big lesson for us today. And even as we pass on this to the next generation, we have to realize that the same pace at which we were running might not be the same pace, because sometimes as parents, we tend to pass some kind of ideology. Okay, it's all about being fast. But are you sure that that's actually what's going to work for that child? Right? So, and again, a conventional advice, the advice that we're hearing now is be fast. But have you actually taken time to be slow, to reflect, to replenish? And if you look at the foundation and the creation, a lot of things reflected slowliness. You said be fruitful. Fruitfulness is a slow process. Multiply is a slow process, right? Because it takes time for you to multiply, either by procreation or so. It takes time, 9 months, replenish the earth. All of those things are slow, are processes that take slow, because if you try to make it fast, you're going to crash. So this is so powerful to end this podcast. Do you want to share something? Because I see you nodding your head, and I think like...
No, you're speaking my language, right? So I know that, again, I cheated a little bit, but to summarize everything, the one word I would say is rest. Okay. Rest. The number of times I have people that say, I don't know how to rest. It's so interesting to me, because again, I come from a household where we don't joke with our sleep. We don't joke with our naps, Yet my mom is a physician. My sister is a physician. My other sister is currently in medical school. My brother has done very well for himself in the financial world. And we don't hustle. We work hard, but we rest. We don't hustle. So that would be my word, rest.
Yeah. And, interestingly, this week I've been really, studying, and one of the words that have been coming to me is this word rest. And I like that you shared it, because there's a scripture that says that labor to enter into the rest. I can't remember what scripture, what verse that is. But a lot of times we need to realize that all of the things we're chasing, if we can get into a place of rest, we will see that those things are around us. We attract them. And we just have to, the labor we have to do is the hard work that you mentioned, so that we can get into that state of rest, because everything we're looking for is already within us, right? So thank you. I feel like we're going to have a sermon.
I know. Don't get me started. My faith is a huge part of me, so don't even get me started.
Oh man, I know we're gonna have a rerun on this. So
yes.
thank you so much for being on the podcast. I felt this was a master class on sleep, rest. It's whole and enriching. So thank you for sharing so openly. I believe that what we have discussed today is going to make impact. Now, how do people reach you? What is the best way for them to connect with you?
So social media is probably the best way. I'm active on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn name is Yewande Fadojutimi. I'm also on Instagram at dr.yewande. So that's dr.yewande. And to learn more about Kamy Counselling Services, right now I'm not taking any new clients. Our wait list is very long, and I'm really hoping that we can get through the wait list. But if you just want to learn more about me, Kamy Counselling, you can go to kamycounselling.com, KAMYCOUNSELLING.com, and I'm happy to connect from there.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Share your comments. I want to see what has this, what do you learn from today's episode? What has this conversation stirred inside of you? Send a note on YouTube. If it's on Spotify as well, drop a note. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to reach out to, have a question for Dr. Yewande, reach out to her on Instagram or LinkedIn. But if you're too shy, you can come to me. I can send the questions to her, and then we can get your questions answered. Thank you so much for being a part of today's episode. And to become your way in the next episode, remember, your growth is personal. No one is responsible for your personal growth but you. Stay blessed, and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you love this episode, share it with your friends on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. If you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our episode, and give us a rating. This will help our podcast get more visibility to those who don't know about this podcast. Remember, your growth is personal. No one is responsible for your personal growth but you. Stay blessed.